Welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council with hosts Grace Evans and Moses Brattrud. Stay informed on the top stories on life, family, and religious freedom. Get the facts, stand for truth. Hello and welcome to the Family Beacon podcast. I'm Grace Evans. I'm here with Moses Brattrud, and today I have some very exciting news for you guys. Today, Moses is officially in a different decade than me. And so we can hold that over my head. So happy birthday to Moses.
Thank you.
Moses,
I feel older already.
I really do appreciate having you on the podcast. I don't think I've ever said that on the screen to everyone, but I really do appreciate it. I think, every single week that we do the podcast, I feel like our collaboration gets better, just our insight gets better, and it really has been a wild journey starting back. I don't even know what episode we're on. We're pretty far in, but it has been a delight to be.
But the journey started before that. Because the journey started back when my wife and I taught a Sunday school class at our old church.
Oh no!
There was one student.
Did I even
And
talk
there
much?
was one student who technically wasn't in high school anymore, I don't think, at that point, but sat in on the class.
No, I was.
You were still in high school.
Yeah, I was a senior.
Okay. Anyway, so that is how we met Grace, and then eventually we started doing a podcast together.
For the record, though, I was working at MFC before you.
That's true.
So,
true. As a part-time coffee girl kind of a...
Yeah, it was an intern situation. It actually
position.
was. I started here as a public policy intern, but needless to say, that's neither here nor there. Moses, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Everyone, go comment. If you're on YouTube, put it in the comment section. If you're on Instagram, go comment. Happy birthday, Moses. We need to show him how appreciated he is. Truly, I don't say this lightly. I don't think I could do this without him. Podcasts are so much more interesting when you have another person on the podcast.
So true.
And a conversation is so much more interesting than just Grace Evans rambling on and on. I mean, if the podcast was up to me, I feel like it would be very scripted, it would be very formal, and it would probably... Yeah, it would not be what it is today. So Moses, really glad to have you as a co-host. Best co-host ever. I should get him a mug, like the office one.
I'll take that.
Best boss ever.
I'm always looking for good mugs.
Okay.
For good coffee
I'll
mugs.
have to look into that.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, this week, I just want to give you a summary of what we're going to be talking about. We will be talking about gender confusion. We're going to be talking about 3 stories along this topic. First of all, we'll talk about Texas protecting kids with sports, because every child deserves to compete in sports and to have the chance to win. We'll be talking about Rachel Levine and how he is the first sworn-in openly transgender 4-star Admiral. Finally, we'll be talking about some sex ed curriculum here in the state of Minnesota that is causing gender confusion and has very explicit material and what that means for our state. Without further ado, though, let's just jump into Texas, how they're protecting kids, and what we can take away from this great piece of news, Moses.
Yeah, so this is really encouraging. Texas is obviously one of the biggest states in the country, and it's so encouraging to see them take this step to keep sports integrity and fairness on the front of their agenda. So the bill would ban students who identify as transgender from playing on a team that does not match up with their birth sex. Mm-hmm. Now, for many of us, this is just common sense, right? Right. We know that men, biological males, have certain physical advantages, especially after puberty, and we saw that when we talked about the Olympics, and in various ways, when you have male athletes on female sports teams, they are taking spots away that should have gone and would have gone to female athletes if common sense protections like this one were in place. So Texas is now the 8th state in the country. This is a growing trend to protect athletics, to protect female athletes especially, by passing a bill like this. Now, of course, this is controversial. Mm-hmm. This is, you can read the headlines, and it sounds like it's a targeted bigoted bill that's trying to prevent transgender students from doing something that they should be allowed to do. And I think there's one particular quote from an opponent of the bill, Texas Representative Jessica Gonzalez. She says, "We heard kids pleading to not put their life to be debated by legislators and talking about the harm it would have on them, and yet here we are. We are trying to solve this problem that doesn't exist, calling the bill an attack on transgender children and an invitation for bullying. I just want to say, like this isn't an attack on anyone. Right. It is about fairness. It's about who gets to play on what sports team. It doesn't say that if you're transgender, you can't play sports. It says that if you're transgender, you can play on the team based on your birth sex. In general, that is going to be the best way to ensure that kids are able to be competitive on their own team without having an unfair advantage over other players and over other teams. You know, we don't want to have a girls' soccer team with 5 biologically male players who are then able to sweep through the championship, and that just wouldn't be fair to anyone.
No,
so
this
is
women.
A common sense measure, Grace, and I just don't understand why this is such a cultural problem that we would. It's separate from the idea of identifying as transgender. If you want to identify as transgender, that is a completely different issue, which we have discussed on this podcast, and we will discuss again.
And we have an unwoke video on that too.
We do have an unwoke video on that. One of our better ones, if I do say so myself. My beard was looking really good that day. That's what I'll say. That'll be my teaser to get you watch our unwoke video on that. So, but my last thing on this Texas bill is just that this isn't about being transgender. It's about fairness.
Yeah.
When students identify as transgender, what sports teams should they be allowed to play on? Some, none, any team they choose. You have to choose, and the most common sense and fair measure, in my view, and in the view of many people in this country, a majority certainly, in fact, is that they should be able to play on the team that matches their birth sex, the sex on their birth certificate, every chromosome in their body, and that's my last word on that.
Right, and I mean, if we're going to continue to allow different sexes to play on biological girls versus biological boy teams, then what you should do to be consistent is just do away with those different divisions, and we should just have co-ed sports because for both the sexes combined, because otherwise it just doesn't even make sense to have a girls team and a guys team if there isn't even any difference between the genders.
Right.
By that logic, not advocating for that actually. Moses, you're exactly right. It's just, we live in a world where 2 + 2 does equal 5, and that's seen as right. To quote 1984, which you should definitely read if you haven't already. There are so many things that are fundamentally true that the world looks at and completely bypasses, and they say the opposite, or they say something super contradictory. I mean, it is really insane that we do live in a culture where it is controversial to say that only women can get pregnant. And it's just, it really is crazy. Even 5 years ago, that wasn't a thing. 5 years ago, people weren't talking about pregnant people.
I know.
Or chest feeding persons.
Quickly.
Right,
my wife and I were at the birthing center that where we're doing initiation and stuff like that for in anticipation of having our little baby boy in February. So excited about that.
Yeah.
And they made us watch a video.
You haven't told the podcast that the baby's a boy yet.
No, that's a scoop. That's a scoop. We have one little girl, and now we're going to have a little boy, and I'm just over the moon.
So exciting.
Also, a little bit intimidated by that. I don't know why. Just seems like having a boy is going to be harder, but we'll see. We'll see.
If he's like you.
Yeah, well, my mom thinks that girls are easier, so, but she never had one, so we'll see.
How dare you assume your baby's gender before it's born?
Yeah, exactly. I think that is horrifying.
Yeah, it is.
That
it really is.
I just potentially lied about my children's sex, because we won't know. We won't know until he tells us or she tells us.
Do you know that some parents actually just use gender neutral pronouns after their child is born until their child grows up? And sometimes parents have been talking about, some more progressive parents have been talking about how they think it's wrong to name their children, because how dare they name their child, or even
hence the rise of gender neutral names, which we see all the time. Right,
and even some people say, some very progressive people say that who are they to choose to bring a child into this world? Which
we've discussed.
Did we discuss that in the podcast? I didn't remember that. Yep. Yeah, it's crazy. There's some really crazy stuff happening.
Speaking of that, tell us about another a person who identifies as transgender who also made waves this week. Made waves.
Yeah, so Rachel Levine was just sworn in as our very first openly transgender 4-star Admiral. So this
Although not in the Navy, so the wave thing doesn't really work.
So this appointment, Moses, puts him at the head of Public Health Service Commission Corps. So it puts him ahead of 6,000 public health service officers, and he is a biological male, but he identifies as a biological female. Mm-hmm. And I don't really have too much profound to say on this, other than people have come out and said, Becerra has come out and said that this...
Health and Human Services Secretary Javier Becerra.
Yeah, he's come out and called Levine a cherished and critical partner in our work to build healthier America. So many people are praising this on the other side of the aisle. So just there's a lot of praise going on about this, and people are seeing this as a huge step for the LGBTQ plus movement and community. And Moses, tell us a little bit more though about who got in trouble.
Yeah. So I want to say one thing first.
Okay.
I think it's crazy that when you look at news articles about this, they're saying that Rachel Levine is the first female admiral of the public health services. And I just think it's one thing to say that they're a transgender, that he is a transgender woman. Okay, that's one thing. But to say like female, like that, even 5 years ago, it used to be like there were biological men and biological males and biological female. Those terms have only went out of they only went extinct in the woke lingo 5 years ago, and it was okay to talk about someone being transgender but who is actually a male. And now we're saying not this isn't the first transgender woman. This is the first female. This absolute blurring of the boundaries between someone saying that they are something and someone being something.
And it's actually a really good point, Moses. I didn't really think about that till you said it, but imagine how degrading it is to women, actually, because imagine if we had a president, like say Biden decided to say that he was female and he was like, I'm the first female president. That's so degrading, because women, have fought we had to fight to get our vote. We had to fight for our education. We have had to fight for a lot of things. And thankfully we live in a country where we have equal opportunity, but when men are coming and stripping away the things that we ourselves should be achieving, it downplays the strength that women have. And especially with this here, if Biden said that he was the first female president, I would laugh, first of all, but then I'd be sad, because why would you take away something from women? I don't know. This is just...
No, it's like, it's one thing to put on a dress, as a man. I don't support that, but that's one thing. And then it's another thing to say, I'm a woman, give me the awards for being a woman.
Right.
Give me the plaudits. Hand me out the diplomas. First woman blank, first woman, and it's just like, oh, please. Also, I have to say that I did not know that we had a uniformed public health service.
Oh, I didn't know that either.
Yeah, like that's what this person is an admiral in, right? Like, not the Navy. As you said, they oversee the commissioned corps leading 6,000 public health service officers. I did not know that those people wore uniforms.
I didn't know they did.
In fact, I didn't really know that they existed. It's kind of like 4-star admiral of what? 4-star admiral of a bunch of nurses and doctors.
He's the first female one.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
what matters.
Exactly. Now, speaking of this issue, the comedian Dave Chappelle, he got in trouble the same week that this is going on. Dave Chappelle's comedy special, The Closer, came out on Netflix recently, and there's been a lot of heat about some terms that he used. Dave Chappelle referred to himself as a TERF, which stands for a trans exclusionary radical feminist. So kind of like J.K. Rowling basically being like, hey, I'm all for women's rights and I'm all for you identifying as whatever the heck you want to do, but a man claiming to be a woman is not a woman. So that's Dave Chappelle's position. He even compared transgender identity to blackface, which is very controversial. I mean, that's like kicking the hornet's nest right there. And yet and so there's all this pushback. Netflix's CEO just came out and is walking back comments he made earlier, but they're not going to cancel Dave Chappelle because Dave Chappelle's making Netflix way too much money. At least that's my prediction. If I'm wrong,
Which is weird, because honestly, Netflix is just there's nothing good on there anymore. I mean, my parents...
Well, there's Dave Chappelle on there.
My parents have a subscription, and every time... I rarely go on there because I don't have time to watch TV, but anytime I go on there, everything looks bad. Ever since I took The Office off, there's nothing good.
I have to say that I kind of agree. Like, I find more on Amazon Prime. But I think...
Disney Plus is good because there's Disney movies, but...
Except that Disney movies are bad. But moving on...
what is this? Tangled. The best.
Oof. Tangled is actually not that bad.
I love Tangled.
Yeah, but it's like... Okay, well, do you want me to go on my rant about the Marvel Universe? No, we'll save that. We'll save that for another week.
I did just see the new Marvel movie.
Oh, you did? I watched a Marvel movie with my wife, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, and it was the most sophomoric, stupid... I just felt it was...
Us like we just murdered someone.
Like, I enjoyed the first one. But I come to the second one, and I just, like, the humor is aimed at 10-year-olds. Dumb 10-year-olds. Okay.
Interesting.
But Dave Chappelle. Yeah. So Dave Chappelle, and I don't want to dwell on this because I'm not Dave Chappelle, but him saying that transgenderism is like blackface. So blackface is when, this is a huge thing back in the early 20th century, white singers and musicians would wear black makeup on their face and blackface minstrels. That was a huge thing, and it was really uncomfortable. Like, it's not something anyone would do, and yet we have continuous episodes of people like Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Virginia's Governor Ralph Northam, continuing to like have these pictures of appearing in blackface. It was a thing in the South for a long time, although that doesn't explain how Canada's Prime Minister did it. Anyway, so when you put on blackface, you are presumably a non-black person, a white person or an Asian person or whatever, and you're for comedic effect pretending to be black. And I think we can all agree that that's not okay.
Right, it's not okay.
And you are making light of something that's really personal to people. You are taking on an identity that is not your own. And that's what men are doing when they pretend to be women, okay? I know that's controversial, but I agree with Dave Chappelle there. If you are a man pretending to be a woman or a woman pretending to be a man, then in some sense what you're doing is kind of like blackface. So there's a lot we could say about Rachel Levine and whether he's the best person to be the first female 4-star admiral, or indeed the best person to be the Assistant U.S. Secretary of Health. But more pressing matters and more local matters that we should look at. Some really concerning curriculum being used in Minnesota. Grace, can you tell us more about that?
Yep, definitely. So here, the Minnesota Department of Health is promoting sex ed curriculum that is written by a former Planned Parenthood worker, which should raise concern. So MDH, Minnesota Department of Health, promotes this organization on their website, and this organization is very closely aligned with Planned Parenthood. So this organization is called Advocates for Youth. It was founded in 1980. And they work closely with Planned Parenthood to, quote, promote effective adolescent reproductive and sexual health programs and policies. And it's directed...
Big red flag.
Right, that is a big red flag. And so I'm just going to read you some quotes about this. I mean, this is from their website, Advocates for Youth. We'll have it on the screen here. This is their mission statement, right? They say, we will be able to shift the current cultural paradigm in which we live from one that too often stigmatizes youth and youth sexual development to one that embraces youth as partners and recognizes sexuality as normal and healthy.
I'm sorry, the language embraces youth as partners is really unfortunate. Let's not talk about that way.
Continuing.
Am I the only one who's uncomfortable with that?
I'm definitely uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable with this whole thing. Whenever a health organization is linking arms with Planned Parenthood, that makes me uncomfortable because Planned Parenthood exploits women.
Right.
So continuing with Advocates for Youth, their mission statement, they say that their organization seeks to redress these social determinants by working in coalition with economic and social justice organizations by engaging, empowering, and mobilizing young leaders from marginalized communities to serve as activists and leaders in the field of sexual health.
Oh, no.
And furthermore, they are LGBTQ plus inclusive, trauma-informed, and culturally responsive. And so obviously there's a lot of language in here. This is just part of their mission statement. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of language in here that we recognize, talking about race, talking about trauma, talking about LGBTQ plus inclusion, sexuality. There's a lot of terminology in here, and it's hard. But really what I want to get down to is it recently came under fire here in Minnesota, this organization, because of its educational program, Moses, called the 3 R's, which these R's stand for rights, respect, and responsibility. And
I think they should stand for wrong, wrong, wrong.
And this curriculum is actually currently used in Richfield Public Schools.
Yes, and others. Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of explicit content. I mean, there's so many things. I mean, they have high schoolers participate in explicit role-playing scenarios, and why would you do that at school? I don't know. I mean, I guess according to their mission statement, to promote inclusivity and create a safe space for LGBTQ plus persons. But this curriculum also, it doesn't stop there. I mean, even at kindergarten, young children are exposed to transgenderism as something that is true and beautiful. And so really it is problematic. And
I have a story about this. When so I actually spoke with one of the moms who is the subject of this article and who addressed the Richfield City Council, or the Richfield School Board rather. And this is just a really interesting story because this is a Christian homeschooling mom, so she's not directly involved with this in the sense that her children are not participating in it. But she was at the park in Richfield, and she got into conversation with a Somali woman. And the Somali woman was telling her about what her kindergarten-age daughter came home with one day. And the Somali mother, started crying.
Wow.
Because according to them, and we have no reason to doubt this, not only was explicit language used to refer to female anatomy, but explicit pictures of presumably cartoons of the explicit male and female anatomy were shown in this kindergarten classroom. Now, this is one parent's testimony, and so on the basis of this, this woman started talking to other parents in the community, and she especially noticed that Muslim parents, especially moms, were not happy about this.
Right.
And so long term is that she's trying to build a coalition to fight this curriculum, and getting this type of news coverage is absolutely one of the first steps. And we're also, as an organization, doing other things to help this community and other communities fight back against this explicit sex ed. And I want to say one more thing about this. It's like for older listeners, you may think of sex ed as something that absolutely should happen in school. Maybe you took health class, and they told you about anatomy in 8th grade or in high school or whenever it was, and they told you about male and female anatomy and told you the biological facts about sexual reproduction. That is fine from my book. That's what I had in school at a Christian school, and there was no agenda. There was no teaching children about gender, transgender roles, and all that. And so, it's really important for older people and anyone who's a parent to realize that sex ed in public schools and probably some private schools, you need to be vigilant about this, is a vector for bringing the sexual revolution home to your kids, so that they're not thinking of themselves as a boy or a girl, and they're not, even at a very young age, not thinking of themselves as a boy or a girl, but as this sort of gender unicorn who gets to eventually decide in the fullness of time which gender they feel like.
I have an example of that. I have the curriculum pulled up right in front of me, and for the second graders, one of their exercises in their curriculum is to create a Venn diagram, and the Venn diagram is boys circle on one side, girls circle on the other, and then in the middle, anyone, overlapping. And they have the kids draw that on their own papers in second grade. So you're absolutely right about this gender unicorn thing. I mean, what Moses is saying, if you even look up the 3 R's curriculum, you will see exactly what he's saying exemplified. We don't want to walk into too many details because, honestly, it gets pretty graphic.
Yeah, and this is not even the most explicit curriculum out there.
Right.
So be careful what you Google,
Right.
is
So
all I'm saying.
Yeah, this is a family program, so we don't want to get into all the nitty gritty. But if you do Google it and you're interested in knowing even more of what is going on in our public schools, it absolutely backs the point that Moses is trying to make. And I guess this story also it really shows the direct linkage between the gender revolution, the sex revolution, and abortion. Because,
right.
Deborah Hauser, the president of Advocates for Youth, used to be a Planned Parenthood director, I believe. And
isn't that cozy?
It's cozy. And she's actually come out and said, she's praised Planned Parenthood for their facilitation of fetal tissue and experiments on it because of its contribution to the advancement of human science. She's gone out and praised that. She says that she is so grateful for Planned Parenthood and its work to help minorities, which, by the way, Planned Parenthood does not help minorities. I mean, they strategically place themselves in minority neighborhoods.
Right.
So acknowledging this linkage between Planned Parenthood and Advocates for Youth really is crucial to our conversation because Planned Parenthood specifically places itself in minority communities to target minority women, which is not in their best interest because abortion hurts children and it also hurts women. So there is a direct linkage, and whenever Planned Parenthood is out promoting some sort of sex ed curriculum, or if a sex ed curriculum is right on board with Planned Parenthood, that should raise a red flag in our mind, and we should not want that in our public schools or for our children, because our children, quite frankly, deserve better. Right.
They absolutely do. And, the Advocates for Youth, it actually could be worse. The thing is that Advocates for Youth is a separate organization from Planned Parenthood, but Planned Parenthood North Central States, based in St. Paul, they brag on their website that they themselves are the largest provider of sexual education in Minnesota. So they themselves develop curricula, which, unlike the Advocates for Youth thing, is not available publicly online. So we don't immediately have access to that content. But I'm certain that, as Grace said, the connection between abortion and sex ed is explicitly made because, the dark reading, I guess, is that they're creating their own future customers, right?
Yeah. And this just goes to show this is what happens in a world where you put yourself on a pedestal above all other things. Truly, when you are the very most important thing, then you're going to do these things. If you think that your conception of reality is what matters and is the objective truth, and if you believe truth is otherwise subjective, then you're going to end up with things like this. You're going to end up with women believing that they can kill their children or have their children killed by Planned Parenthood. And that's not a moral wrong, and that's how you end up with an entire generation being confused about what gender they are because they don't know if they're male or female, even though they were born with a gender that is ordained by God. And so they are very much linked together with The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, to quote our friend Carl Truman.
Yeah.
Definitely an amazing book on this topic. We'll have it on the screen for you right now. If you want to check it out, Moses and I have both read it. Great book, and it talks about this more, the sexual revolution and just the rise of the self. But I think, Moses, now maybe we can transition into just closing in for a landing. I know we've had a lot of longer episodes lately. Moses and I have had so much to say, and we don't want to be overly long-winded every single podcast, even though there is a lot of news. Moses, what are you reading this week?
Well, I'm still working on the Russian Revolution book that I talked about last week. That's really good. And then my wife and I have started reading Jane Eyre.
Oh, I love that book.
Okay.
Do you like it so far?
I really like it. Yeah, we're a little bit more than halfway. Don't spoil it for me because I do not know what happens. And that's just been really enjoyable. It's a different type of Victorian novel. I read a lot of Victorian novels, but it's a different kind than what I'm used to. So I really appreciate that. And yeah, actually, I'm kind of addicted.
Wow,
so
that's great.
Yeah. So what are you reading?
Yeah, so I'm reading kind of two things. I am reading Paradise Lost by Milton for school because I have a huge assignment due actually tonight.
Oh my goodness.
It's like 7,000 words. It's a lot.
That's so long.
Actually, I won't say on the podcast just in case, but I am great at procrastinating school. And then also, over break, Moses, I wanted to talk to you about this actually. I read Dracula. I listened to it.
Oh, really?
Have you ever listened to it already?
I have, yeah.
Okay, because, good. I'm so glad. Because
Wait, no, I'm sorry. I haven't. I was thinking of Frankenstein. No, I've never read it.
Frankenstein's great. Shoot, that's such a bummer because a lot of people that I'm close with haven't read Dracula, and I'm surprised because it's a classic. Anyways, I listened to it. I was definitely immediately drawn in, and the author is a talented writer. Like, he's great at describing things, but I guess I was just underwhelmed by it all, by the ending.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was drawn in and stuff, and obviously it's a gothic novel, but it just there's a lack of character development. I won't give any spoilers, but I just felt like there wasn't a character developing in a certain way and achieving something.
Well, be fair. They developed from being a character who had not had their blood sucked to be a character who had all of their blood sucked out of them.
Yeah, but I don't know. And also, I feel like there wasn't a huge takeaway from it. I mean,
the takeaway is don't suck people's blood. I don't know why this is difficult, Grace.
The only takeaway was like, don't walk around outside at night, stay away from bats.
Good advice for living in Minneapolis.
That's true. But I don't know. I just felt like there should have been more. And I was reading some academic articles online because what better way to procrastinate my college paper than by reading a classic and reading academic articles on it. And I was like, okay, has anyone commentated on like significant themes? Because even as far as themes, I was like, what themes even stand out in this besides like blood and death and creepy castles?
Vampirism.
But apparently there's an idea that some academics have propagated that like the biting of the vampire, there's a lot of women bit in this novel, is akin to, it like demonstrates women having sex before marriage or something. It's supposed to like defile their innocence.
Okay.
And I was like, that just sounds like a sexist feminist thing because they were trying to make this point that, I don't know. Anyways, point being made, I just felt like there wasn't a huge takeaway. I wasn't really bought by that whole thing. Maybe I need to look into it more. But I need to find someone who has read it and loves it or hates it or something, and we can just talk about it because I think
I
just need to talk to someone about it because I guess I just expected so much more from it.
So Dracula sounds really interesting. Maybe I need to check that out. So as Grace said, this is a bit of a shorter episode. Let us know in the comments if you prefer a shorter episode, like around 35 minutes, or whether you prefer the episodes we have been doing with a length more like 45 minutes. We are comfortable with either length and we're interested in what you, our audience, have to say. We're so grateful for everybody who tunes in and watches or listens every week. You guys are amazing. Our audience is trending upward, and we love to see that. Mm-hmm. Please do. If you're on YouTube, make sure to click that little bell icon so that you get a notification every time we release a podcast or other video on our channel.
Wish Moses happy birthday in the comments.
Please do wish me a happy birthday in the comments. Please feel free to send money. And also, if you're on...
I know what Moses Bratchard.
My best birthday present you could get me would be to leave a 5-star review for us on iTunes. That really matters.
Oh, yeah.
iTunes doesn't exist anymore. On Apple Podcasts. Wow, showing, again, how old I am. So this has been The Family Beacon with Moses Bratchard and Grace Evans. Thank you so much for watching or listening. Have a wonderful weekend.
Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you're up to date on life, family, and religious freedom. You can follow us on Instagram at MN Family Council and subscribe to us on YouTube to watch our content. Get the facts, stand for truth.